Murfreesboro and Rutherford County are so rich in their respective histories, with many women who've had integral roles in creating our community's sense of place. The Rutherford Arts Alliance is proud to partner with Murfreesboro City TV to showcase a number of these women as a part of our Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History project. From murals to our community-involved play, A Party of 12 by Mary Donay Johnson, we're proud to honor these diverse women of our past who inspire us as we give them a voice in today's world. Let's find out more about one of these leading ladies.
Born in 1906, Adeline King was a Smyrna native and graduate of the Tennessee College of Women. King was a teacher, chief clerk at the Smyrna Air Force Base, and wrote articles for the Rutherford Courier and the Tennessean, among others. It was her talents for writing where she would truly make an impact. She would write newsletters of life in Smyrna to those serving all over during World War II, filled with stories of home activities, witty anecdotes, and words of inspiration. These letters would grow to become what was called the Smyrna Bulletin. We find out more about Adeline's life from family members John and Florine Johns, and why she was such a great leading lady.
John, tell us about how you're related to our leading lady, Adeline King.
She was my mother's sister. There was two brothers, a brother that was older and a brother that was younger, that died at birth. Mm-hmm. So I only had one aunt. Mm-hmm. And she never married. And they lived on the farm where my grandparents had acquired from the family. My grandfather was very industrious and had a gasoline-powered feed mill. And the people used to drive their stock to Nashville along Jefferson Pike, and they would stop there for the night and of course feed the animals, pigs and chickens and turkeys and cattle, taking them to market. So there weren't any big trucks in those days. Mm-hmm. Going back to my aunt, we would go and stay with her. Tom and I, my brother, would go and stay with her in Nashville once she moved to Nashville, and that was always a treat because she would take us to the movie that night, or she had tickets to the basketball games, Vanderbilt, and was a big fan of basketball, and so she would take us to the games too. So we always look forward to going for a sleepover, I guess you'd call it. So,
and, sounds like a fun aunt.
Oh yeah, and she would come out on Saturdays a lot of times, and Mother would have dinner, Saturday lunch for her. And we'd, of course, eat together. And sometimes she always had this recipe for the lemon icebox pie. And so that became my favorite. And I even wrote back to her later and said, how did you make it? Because I started making it years later even. So
Florine, do y'all have that recipe now?
Well, we were in the Air Force, each of us, that's how we met, in Southern California at March Air Force Base, and John could cook fried chicken and something else to go with it, and lemon icebox pie with Adeline's recipe. We still have the little piece of paper with the handwritten recipe.
How
and
exciting.
It's still one of his favorites, yes.
How exciting. I was thinking about Adeline. As a young woman, I know she was known for her writing. She was a writer.
She loved to write. Once she graduated from Middle Tennessee Teachers College, she went and taught Latin and English at War Trace. Mm-hmm. And there for several years, I'm not sure how many. And in her later years, she was still writing to some of those students. I said, how did she do that? I said, I went to one place or the other, and you write a letter to, but after a while you don't know interest you had. So you just, nowadays, of course, you got the internet and stuff, but.
Tell them about the letter she wrote to the soldiers.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
whole
Well, she
body of
during
letters.
this, she worked at the Stewart Air Force Base during World War II, and she wrote to all the fellows that were from Smyrna and Rutherford County while they were overseas, and some of them would write back and stuff. And that's how the lady that got her paper said, "Oh, we need to preserve those and put them at the library at Middle Tennessee." I guess it's Al Gore Library, and
It's
And
called the
thinking of-
Gore Center,
Yeah.
part of the library there.
Thinking about when she was younger, you might tell them about the family that your grandparents adopted and raised,
Okay,
while
yeah.
Adeline, along with your mother and Adeline.
right. Okay, when my grandmother and grandfather first married, they bought a farm. Not necessarily when they first married, but they did buy a farm and lived
And their
there.
names were?
Ernest King and Susan Matthews. Susan Matthews is my grandmother. She was born on the 15th of June, and I have her birthday. Which,
Oh, that's neat.
And Matthews is his middle name.
yeah, so I was named, John Matthews, and she was Susan Matthews, Johns. And Matthews is a family name, goes quite a ways back. They lived on this farm, and down the road from the farm there was a little cabin, and a family of African Americans lived. And the mother had died, and the grandmother was taking care of the 3 little boys. And she sent word to my grandfather to come down. She needed to talk to him, and she said, "I'm not going to live much longer, and I need somebody to look after these boys." They were 12 and 13 years old, and they're too young to be on their own. Would you look after them? And of course, they did.
Oh,
And
that's
Adeline
wonderful.
was about how old at that time?
Well, I've got a picture of her in a wheelbarrow. She's 2 years old, and the little boys were sitting around. They had been playing with her, I'm sure, but they took them into their home.
That's wonderful.
Not the barn. They lived in the
They
house.
lived in the house. One of them, Ernest Peebles, their name was Peebles. Ernest Turner Peebles.
Turner had this shoe shop.
He took a liking to taking care of the harness for the mules on the farm. And later years, he had a shoe shop in Smyrna. And, of course, working in leather. And then Ellis, when he went in, he helped my grandmother in the kitchen because they'd had to prepare a big dinner lunch for.
This is one of the children. Ellis.
Yeah, Ellis and Turner were brothers, and Ellis went and helped her, make the biscuits and that sort of thing. And later on, when he went in the Army, of course, they put the black fellows in the cooking. They didn't really, I don't know why, segregation probably, but anyway. And then when he got out of the Army, he went to Chicago and became like a chef in a big hotel.
Wow.
And every Christmas and birthday, Adeline and Miss Johns received a gift from him.
Fruit basket.
Many years.
That's
Many
lovely,
years.
I would
lovely
go
story.
into the shop, Turner's shop, and I'd have my shoes half soled and heels put on them. And if you took them in and gave them to him, he'll put them up on the shelf, and you came back later, they'd still be there. So I learned to take my shoes off in the shop.
Stand there and wait.
He would fix them then, and he would talk to me about my grandparents,
Yeah.
and how they were.
And when I came as a new bride to Smyrna and went to the shoe shop, and he found out who I was married to, and that I was Adeline's niece and Francis's niece, that made me very special.
I bet you were taken into the fold. Yeah. You mentioned she graduated from Middle Tennessee State, probably college at that time.
No, it was Tennessee State Teachers College.
Teachers College.
That's right. That was before that.
University
but
was even there.
She also attended, and this was probably either in elementary or middle school, the Tennessee College for Women.
Right.
that now there's a historical marker on the central magnet. The building doesn't stand, but on the central magnet high school campus, there is a historical marker that tells about that school.
Part of the building was there on Broad for a long time, but I don't think it's there anymore. But going back to when my mother and Adeline were in high school, they would hitch up, my grandfather would hitch up the buggy and they would go to Smyrna and park behind Turner's shop, and he would unhitch the horse and let it graze in the yard while they went to school. When they came back, he'd have it ready for them to go back home.
Wow.
And, so they were very much part of the family. I'm very proud of my grandparents, because this is 1902 or 1907. I said, would you, as of two young girls, 2 and 3 years old, take in 3 or 4 teenage boys, white or black, at this day and time?
Wow. Well, people took care of themselves, and their people around them and so forth. What is the relationship between maybe the farm or your family and the Sam Davis home? Adeline had a relationship there.
Right. My grandfather's oldest sister is Ida King. She married Oscar Davis, which was about 2 miles from when people married, they married very close. You didn't go across country.
Those are the only people you knew.
So Ida King married Oscar Davis, and Ida was, I guess, Adeline's favorite aunt. Ida was a big storyteller and liked to talk, and Adeline has told me several times that they would go over to visit at the Sam Davis home and sit on the back porch, and Ida would just tell story after story. Oscar Davis, they called him Pa Davis. They would come for dinner at my grandmother's house, and they would, Pa Davis became very bitter because he had gone to Pulaski with another man to pick up Sam Davis's body and brought him back. And Ida lived at the Sam Davis home. And then Ida's granddaughter, I believe her name was Ida King Davis, was a contemporary of Adeline. They were the same. In fact, I've got a picture of them standing together. My mother, Ida King Davis, and Adeline, and another girl, I can't remember her name. But one year when I was out in California, Adeline told me to go and visit Ida, and I didn't know who it was. And I to this day, I regret not following up. But Ida had married a man by the name of Henry King. Henry King was a producer, and he made the movie 12 O'Clock High. And so just a lot of, I wished, one of my major regrets that I didn't go on.
So she was an English major. I don't guess women had any kind of training other than that for writing then, because she had several different careers related to her writing ability.
I think she just, journalism, she English and Latin and writing, I guess, was part of that.
And she wrote for the newspaper, the Smyrna, not the Rutherford Courier, was it?
I would say it would be.
Yeah, she had a
Smyrna
column
Bulletin
there
also
for years.
And when she was at the Bridge Company, she wrote a paper or a part of the Bridge Company newsletter. And when these, I forgot who asked her to write a kind of a synopsis. They called it. It was about Sam Davis's life, and they had these pageants at the Sam Davis home for several years, and she wrote that, and it was put
She
on.
wrote the script for that.
Right, the script, like a play.
Playwright, sort of.
Yeah.
How did she get from Smyrna to Berkeley? What was, speaking of California.
Well, she just decided she wanted to go out and take some classes there.
Was this after she
After-
graduated from?
Well, it may have been, she may have gone and taught for a while. I don't know the exact how that happened, but I know she did go. In fact, she was writing some of the people that
From
she
out
knew
there.
out there too when she was in her old
So
age.
how long was she in
She went, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 semesters, maybe
Wow.
4, I don't know.
I didn't know.
At that time, that was a long piece
Oh,
from
that's a
Smyrna
long way to go.
to University of California,
She was-
Berkeley,
she
and
was a
2
warrior
different
woman.
cultures. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, being educated at that time, my grandparents were pretty well off and sent her and my mother there to school at college. Not a lot of people in those days went on, especially women. So,
Right.
so she had an advantage of being well educated.
We've got to picture that, you know, from the early 1900s until she died at 94 or so, you know, we went through the 1920 when women actually received the right to vote. So I think that gives you a flavor for how progressive your family was, encouraging. And I think she also studied at Peabody in Nashville when
I
it was
believe so.
Peabody College,
Right, which
which
was
is now
teachers.
part of Vanderbilt.
Right.
I'm interested in sharing with our audience about how you found out about the Leading Ladies program to talk about cousins in today's world. So how did you find out about this Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History, Women Who Inspire Us project?
Well, first of all, I was gathering information to do a genealogy. My brother had done our genealogy on the King side and on the John side back in 1950s. And I had gotten the idea, after getting a bunch of pictures, the idea to bring his genealogy up to the present. And so one of the times I went and to Sally Norton to get her side of the family, Bill and her brother Bill and I were good friends, and we went to the same church, and he went to a military academy. So I knew Sally, and she called me, that's what it was, and said, we're doing something on Adeline and Beulah King, and she'd like to talk to me about it. And so I took some pictures over there and had a sit down with her, and I believe Carmen was on the phone with us. And,
John has spent a lot of time connecting with cousins and distant
Oh, it's been
cousins
a-
and all over the country, getting pictures and phone conversations. It's really been an
well, it's been
exciting thing for
It's just
him.
been a joy to
Yeah.
reconnect with people, some that I didn't know that were like Sally. I didn't really know her, but her brothers I knew, and then a lot of cousins that I've just reconnected with. It's just made it more fun than
So he
than
has
anything.
a lot of stories, a lot of stories.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing about the Southern culture and studying families and getting reconnected,
Well-
even though your lives kind of go separate as cousins, and to get back together and reconnect.
Well, people would come to visit on Sunday. It was a day to visit, and everybody would sit on the front porch, and of course we'd sit there and listen to the stories. And one of the stories that Adeline used to tell was a lot of people would show up at lunchtime, just opportunistically. And of course, my grandparents would invite them in, and she said one of the relatives had brought their boyfriend, and my mother and my sister and Adeline would have to stay in the kitchen because there wasn't room around the table, and they'd eat later. And one of the boyfriends said, "I had 5 pieces of chicken."
Oh my goodness!
And Adeline,
And of course, they didn't get any.
they didn't get
Oh
any
yeah,
chicken.
because the
And what someone said too, isn't it wonderful you have all this free food?
Yeah, from the garden.
Yeah, Adeline
A lot
would
of
tell
fun
the stories
stories.
about how they got shuffled into the kitchen and many times didn't get a full meal.
And then another story, Adeline used to tell that her mother and father raised 3 other families. The Peoples family, the 3 girls, her, I guess that would be her cousins, and then up the side road from the house on the farm called Rock Springs Road, a family had adopted this girl, and they kind of used her as a house person, you know, and she got to be good friends with Mother and Adeline, and she'd come down and visit and stuff. And so over the years, they were, you know, good friends, and her name was Anna Margaret, and they called it Cousin Anna. This called, you know, it wasn't cousin, but they called her Cousin Anna. And they would come, they'd tell these stories and just laugh. And like, you know, some people said, oh, we had a flat tire and we just, oh, it's awful. They'd say, oh, we were going here and we had a flat tire and we couldn't get it fixed, and just laughing the whole time. So,
yeah.
That's a wonderful part of the Southern culture too.
Yeah.
To do
Well,
that.
some people, you know, everything's sour grapes, and others is just, life is joy.
Yeah,
You know?
there's an adventure at the end of the flat tire.
And Adeline always had a very upbeat attitude about life. When she moved from her apartment in Nashville back to the little cabin, which was about 50 feet down the walk from the big house, she was perfectly content there with a small arrangement. She had her antiques and her bookshelves and her books, and she loved poetry. Her eyesight began to fail, so she couldn't see well. So she would do Meals on Wheels. She never fussed about, oh, I can't fix my own food or whatever. She just adapted and would have visitors come, and our children were little. We didn't start a family until 17 years of marriage. It was not intentional, but anyway. So our children were younger, and they were a delight to Adeline because little ones are a lot of fun. So we would come on Sundays and visit, and one of the things she loved was to have poetry read to her. So she had her favorite books, which she left to us, and she would say, second shelf from the top, third book from the left. We'd take it, it was exactly the one that she wanted, and I would read to her. So we had a love of poetry and just a good friendship.
And you have those books still.
We have those,
it would be fun
those
to
poetry books.
look at one or two of her
Yeah.
favorite ones
Yeah.
in terms of
Edna
that.
St. Vincent Millay was one of them. Robert Frost.
Well, another story that when she never went to the hospital, or never was till she was in her last days, and I forget do you remember who called us?
Well, Adeline just dreaded the thought of being in a nursing home. And, you know, her prayer was that she would go quickly. So one day she didn't feel well, and they took her to the hospital late morning in Murfreesboro. She was in Smyrna, lived in the cabin at the time. We talked to her on the phone that afternoon, and she sounded fine. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, we get a phone call that Adeline is in distress. So John said to me, well, what should we do? I said, we're going to the hospital. So we took our 2 little ones and off we went, and we were at her bedside. 15 minutes after we arrived, she took her last breath. And when we walked in, all of the monitors, you know, were just reading what was going on. And when we arrived, everything went.
She knew you were there.
And then it calmed all down, and it was 15 minutes from the time we got there, about 4 o'clock in the morning, and she was gone. Just how she wanted to go. It's beautiful. Sad, but beautiful.
We've heard some wonderful stories about Adeline that are special to get to share. But tell me how you feel about getting to tell these stories to other people in Rutherford County, and also to share the details in the stories in book form, not only just with your family, but with other people who live in our county.
Well, I just find it very important that these stories get preserved as well as we can. Adeline was a well-educated lady for her time, and was very, I don't know what you'd say, Florian, kind person. She cared about people.
She did. She was a generous spirit. She encompassed whoever was in front of her.
And she certainly took the local stories of Smyrna,
yes,
and shared those with people who had experienced that were either in the military service and living away or had moved away.
Right.
So she preserved that sense of place of Smyrna through her letter writing.
Right.
And the fact that she reached out to the soldiers in the war
Right.
was her initiative. I mean,
Yeah.
she wasn't, it was her idea. And to keep them informed of what's going on here in Smyrna, and to tell the people in Smyrna what was happening to them. So,
Because they wrote her back.
Right.
You could tell it really meant a
Right.
lot to her.
Yeah.
They wrote her
Oh,
back.
yeah.
For more information about our project, Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History, visit our website, leadingladiesrutherford.com. Or if you have a story of someone from the past who inspired you, you can share it on our website. For more information about the Rutherford Arts Alliance and what we're doing to promote arts, culture, and heritage, visit rutherfordartsalliance.org. And thank you for watching.